Hello and welcome back to English in Fluency. I am your host, Alex, and I am so happy to have you here with me today. If you are listening to this, it means you are ready to take a massive step forward in your English journey. You are not just here to learn a new word or two. You are here to build something much more important, something that many students forget about until they are in the middle of a difficult conversation. You are here to build your listening stamina. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been listening to a podcast or perhaps watching a movie in English, and for the first few minutes, you understand everything perfectly? You feel great, and you think to yourself that you are finally fluent. But then, after 5 or 10 minutes, your brain starts to feel tired. You start to lose focus. The words begin to blend together, and suddenly, you realize you have no idea what the person is talking about anymore. If that sounds familiar, do not worry, because you are not alone. This is exactly what we call a lack of listening stamina. Just like running a marathon requires physical endurance, listening to a second language for a long time requires mental endurance. It is a muscle. And today, we are going to go to the gym for your ears. In this special extended series, we are going to listen to a longer story. We are not going to break it up into tiny little pieces right away. Instead, I want you to relax and try to follow the flow of the narrative. The story we are following involves a woman named Elena and her best friend, Julian. They are faced with a significant challenge in their local community, and they have to solve a problem that involves planning, emotions, and a lot of communication. This is perfect for B1 level practice because the vocabulary is common, but the sentences are longer and more descriptive. I want you to pay attention to the details. Do not stress if you miss a word. Just keep listening and try to imagine the scene in your head. Let us begin with the first part of our story. We find Elena sitting in a small, crowded cafe on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The rain is tapping rhythmically against the glass window, blurring the view of the busy street outside. Elena is looking down at a notebook that is open on the table in front of her. The notebook is filled with scribbles, crossed-out lines, and circle marks. She looks stressed. She lifts her heavy ceramic mug to her lips, blowing away the rising steam before taking a small, cautious sip of the dark, bitter liquid. She checks her watch. Julian is late. As you picture this scene, think about the atmosphere. It is not just about the words cafe or rain. It is about the feeling of waiting and the feeling of anxiety. Elena is planning a surprise retirement party for their favorite high school teacher, Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable has taught history for over 40 years, and she is a legend in their town. Elena wants everything to be perfect, but right now, nothing is going according to plan. Finally, the bell above the cafe door jingles, signaling a new customer. Elena looks up and sees Julian shaking his wet umbrella. He spots her in the corner and rushes over, looking a bit flushed and out of breath. He pulls out the chair opposite her and sits down with a heavy sigh, unzipping his wet raincoat. He apologizes immediately, saying that the traffic was terrible because of the storm, and that he had to park 3 blocks away. Elena smiles, though it is a tired smile, and tells him not to worry. She pushes the notebook toward him and says that they have a bigger problem than the traffic. Let's pause there for just a second. I want to highlight the phrase out of breath. Julian was out of breath. This means he was breathing hard, probably because he was running or walking very fast. It is a great phrase to use when you have exerted yourself physically. Also, notice Elena's reaction. She does not get angry. She immediately redirects the focus to the notebook. This tells us that she is focused on the task. Now, let's go back to the conversation. Julian looks at the notebook and his eyes widen. He asks Elena what all the red ink means. Elena explains that the venue they wanted, the community center hall, is being renovated next month. Mrs. Gable retires in 3 weeks. They cannot use the hall. Julian leans back in his chair and runs a hand through his damp hair. He asks if they can change the date of the party. Elena shakes her head and explains that Mrs. Gable is moving to Florida to live with her sister 2 days after her retirement. The date is fixed. It has to happen before she leaves. Listen to how the tension is building. They have a time limit. This is a very common situation in English stories and in real life. You have a deadline. A deadline is the final time by which you must complete a task. In this story, the deadline is Mrs. Gable's move to Florida. Julian thinks for a moment. He suggests that perhaps they could host the party at a restaurant instead. He mentions a place called the Golden Spoon, which is an Italian restaurant that Mrs. Gable loves. Elena sighs and taps her pen against the paper. She explains that she already called them. The problem is the budget. To rent the private room at the Golden Spoon for 50 people would cost $500 just for the room, not including the food. They have raised some money from former students, but they only have $300 in total. Here is a challenge for your listening stamina. Did you catch the numbers? Let's review them. The cost of the room is $500. The money they have is $300. The gap is $200. When you are listening to long conversations, numbers are often where people get lost because you cannot use context clues to guess a number. You simply have to hear it. So, hearing that difference is crucial to understanding why Elena is so worried. Julian looks at the numbers and nods slowly. He understands the predicament. He asks Elena if they can ask for more donations. Elena says she feels uncomfortable asking people for more money because times are tough for everyone right now. She wants the party to be a celebration, not a burden. Julian agrees. He stays silent for a moment, watching the rain slide down the window pane. Then, his face lights up. He has an idea. He leans forward and lowers his voice, as if he is sharing a secret. He asks Elena about the old library garden. Elena looks confused. She reminds him that it is winter and it is raining. An outdoor party would be a disaster. Julian shakes his head and corrects her. He is not talking about the outside garden. He is talking about the glass conservatory attached to the library. He explains that his cousin works at the library and told him that they just finished cleaning it up for spring events, but it is currently empty. Since it is a public building, the rental fee might be much lower, or even free for a community event involving a local teacher. This is a turning point in the conversation. Notice the vocabulary word conservatory. A conservatory is a room with a glass roof and walls, usually attached to a house or a building, used as a greenhouse or a sunroom. It is like being outside because you can see the sky and trees, but you are warm and dry inside. It sounds like a beautiful solution, doesn't it? Elena's expression changes. She sits up straighter. She asks if he really thinks they would let them use it. Julian shrugs and says It is worth a try. He pulls out his phone to call his cousin right there in the coffee shop. Elena watches him nervously. While Julian is on the phone, she starts making a list of things they would need if the location changes. She writes down tables, chairs, decorations, and music. Julian finishes the call and puts his phone down with a big grin on his face. He tells Elena that his cousin said the conservatory is available on the Saturday they need. However, there is a catch. In English, when we say there is a catch, it means there is a hidden problem or a condition that makes the situation less perfect. Elena asks what the catch is. Julian explains that because it is a library, they are not allowed to play loud music, and they have to clean everything up perfectly by 9 in the evening. Elena considers this. No loud music means no DJ and no dancing. She wonders if that will be boring. Julian points out that Mrs. Gable is 70 years old. She probably prefers conversation and soft background music over a loud dance party anyway. Elena laughs and agrees. She realizes that this might actually be better. It will be more intimate. Intimate means close, friendly, and personal. A huge, loud party might be overwhelming, but a quiet evening in a glass room filled with plants sounds lovely. So, they have solved the venue problem. But now, they have to deal with the food. Remember, they only have $300. If the venue is free or very cheap, they can spend the money on food. But feeding 50 people with $300 is still very difficult. That is only $6 per person. Elena does the math in her head and frowns again. She tells Julian that even with a free venue, they cannot afford a caterer. A caterer is a professional company that provides food and drink for events. Julian is on a roll today, which means he is having a lot of good ideas one after another. He suggests a potluck. I want you to remember this word if you do not know it. A potluck is a gathering where each guest contributes a dish of food. Julian says that since this is a community event, many of Mrs. Gable's former students are now adults who love to cook. He suggests they ask 5 or 6 specific people to bring main dishes and then use the $300 to buy a big cake, drinks, and snacks. Elena loves this idea. It makes the party feel more like a community effort. She starts writing down names of people who might cook. She writes down Sarah, who owns a bakery and might give them a discount on the bread. She writes down Tom, who makes excellent lasagna. Slowly, the stress begins to melt away from her face. She takes another sip of her coffee, which is lukewarm now, but she does not mind. Now, I want to take a moment to pause the story and talk about what you are doing right now. You are listening to a continuous stream of information. You are tracking the location changes, the financial problems, the solutions, and the emotions of the characters. If you are feeling a little bit tired, that is a good sign. It means your brain is working hard to process the B1 structures. We are using a mix of past tense to describe actions, like he pulled out his phone, and present tense to describe the current state of things, like there is a catch. Mixing tenses is something that happens constantly in natural speech, and getting used to shifting between them without getting confused is key to developing your stamina. Let's return to Elena and Julian. They have the venue, the library conservatory, and they have a plan for food, the potluck. Now they need to talk about the guest list. This is often the most dangerous part of planning a surprise party. The secret must be kept safe. Elena pulls out a printed list of names. She tells Julian that she has invited all the current teachers, but finding the contact information for students from 10 or 20 years ago is hard. She is worried she will leave someone important out. Julian looks at the list. He points to a name and asks why Mrs. Gable's neighbor, Mr. Henderson, is not on the list. Elena explains that she heard Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Gable had an argument last year about a fence between their houses, and they haven't spoken since. She doesn't want to create drama at the party. Julian shakes his head. He tells Elena that he saw them walking their dogs together just last week, and they seem to be laughing. He thinks they have made up. Made up is a phrasal verb that means to forgive each other and become friends again after an argument. Julian suggests inviting him, just in case. This part of the conversation highlights the importance of social context. Elena is trying to protect the atmosphere of the party. She is being cautious. Julian is being more observant. He is providing new information that Elena did not have. This dynamic between them is important. Elena is the organizer, the worrier, the planner. Julian is the helper, the observer, and the problem solver. Elena adds the neighbor to the list. She then circles a name in red ink. It is the school principal, Mrs. Higgins. Elena says she has to give a speech, but Mrs. Higgins is known for talking for a very long time. Elena is afraid Mrs. Higgins will speak for an hour and bore everyone. Julian laughs loudly, causing a few people in the coffee shop to turn and look at them. He covers his mouth and apologizes. He whispers that maybe they should put a time limit on the speeches. He suggests telling everyone they have strictly 3 minutes to share a memory. Elena thinks that is a brilliant idea. She writes 3-minute rule in big letters on her notebook. She feels much better. The insurmountable mountain of planning has become a small hill that she can easily climb. She looks at Julian and thanks him sincerely. She says she was ready to give up before he arrived. Julian smiles and says that is what friends are for. He checks his watch and realizes he has to get back to work. He stands up and zips his raincoat back up. Before he leaves, he gives Elena one last task. He tells her to go to the library right now, since she is already in town, and confirm the booking with the librarian in person. He says it is always better to do these things face-to-face to avoid mistakes. Elena agrees. She packs up her notebook, finishes the last drop of her coffee, and stands up. They say goodbye, and Julian walks out into the rain. Elena watches him go, then gathers her bag. She feels a renewed sense of purpose. She is ready to face the librarian. She walks out of the cafe. The rain has stopped, and the sun is trying to peek through the gray clouds. It feels like a good omen. A good omen is a sign that something good is going to happen. Now, as we wrap up this first part of the narrative, I want you to reflect on what you have understood. We established the setting. A rainy cafe. We introduced the conflict. A canceled venue and a low budget. We introduced the solution. A library conservatory and a potluck dinner. We also developed the relationship between Elena and Julian. Did you notice how the description of the weather mirrored Elena's mood? At the beginning, it was raining hard, and Elena was stressed and looking at a messy notebook. At the end, the rain stopped, the sun came out, and Elena felt a sense of purpose. This is a common storytelling technique. Even in simple B1 stories, looking for these connections can help you predict what will happen next, and help you understand the emotional tone of the conversation. We also used several phrasal verbs today. We heard make up, which means to reconcile. We heard zone out in the introduction, which means to lose focus. We heard turn out, which we will likely hear in the next part when we see how the party actually happens. Listening stamina is not built in a day. It is built by pushing yourself to listen a little bit longer than is comfortable. If you felt your mind wandering during the section about the food budget, that is okay. The important thing is that you brought your attention back. You refocused. That act of refocusing is the exercise. That is the repetition that makes you stronger. I want you to take a brief moment now. Let your brain rest. Drink some water. But before you continue, try to summarize the story so far in your own words. Can you say out loud 3 problems Elena faced? Can you say the 3 solutions Julian suggested? If you can do that, you have successfully completed the first stage of this workout. Welcome back to the next section of our story. If you were with us for the first part, you remember that our main character, Elena, was sitting in a cafe, feeling very stressed about organizing a retirement party for her favorite teacher, Mrs. Gable. Her friend Julian helped her come up with a plan. Use the library conservatory as a venue and organize a potluck dinner to save money. In this next part, we are going to follow Elena as she tries to put this plan into action. Moving from a plan to reality is often the hardest part of any project. In English, we call this execution. You have the idea, which is the concept, and then you have the execution, which is the doing. This part of the story will test your ability to follow specific details and administrative conversations. You will hear language related to rules, negotiations, and organizing logistics. Logistics is a great word. It refers to the detailed organization and implementation of a complex operation. So, take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's step back into Elena's world. Elena walks out of the cafe and heads toward the town library. The air is fresh after the rain, and the sidewalks are still wet and shiny. The library is an old brick building with tall white pillars at the entrance. It looks serious and important. Elena feels a little bit nervous. She loves the library, but asking for a favor is always difficult. She pushes open the heavy wooden doors and steps inside. The smell hits her immediately. It is that specific, wonderful smell of old paper, dust, and floor wax. The library is very quiet. All she can hear is the soft sound of pages turning and the clicking of a computer keyboard. She walks up to the main desk. Sitting behind the desk is Mr. Finch. Mr. Finch is the head librarian. He is a tall, thin man with glasses that slide down his nose. He is wearing a gray sweater vest. He looks up over his glasses as Elena approaches. He does not smile, but he does not frown either. He simply waits for her to speak. Elena clears her throat. She explains that she is a former student of Mrs. Gable and that they are looking for a venue for her retirement party. She mentions Julian's cousin and the conservatory. Mr. Finch listens quietly. He taps his finger on the desk. When Elena finishes, he sighs. He tells her that yes, the conservatory is empty on that Saturday. However, he says there is a protocol. Protocol means a set of official rules that must be followed. He explains that while community groups can use the room for free, they must pay a security deposit. This is a very important concept in renting things. A security deposit is a sum of money that you give to the owner to prove that you will take care of the property. If nothing is broken, you get the money back. If something is broken, they keep the money. Mr. Finch says the deposit is $200. Elena feels her heart sink. Remember, they only have $300 in total. If she gives $200 for the deposit, they will only have $100 left for the cake, the drinks, and the decorations. That is almost impossible. She hesitates. She asks Mr. Finch if there is any way to waive the deposit. To waive something means to ignore a rule or a fee in a specific situation. She explains that it is for Mrs. Gable, who has served the community for 40 years. Let's pause here for a moment. This interaction is crucial. Elena is negotiating. She is trying to persuade Mr. Finch. Listen to how the tone changes. She is not demanding. She is pleading. She is using emotional reasons to overcome a financial rule. Mr. Finch looks at Elena. He takes off his glasses and cleans them with a small cloth. He says that he remembers Mrs. Gable. He says she was the only teacher who encouraged him to read science fiction when he was a boy. A small smile appears on his face. He puts his glasses back on. He tells Elena that he cannot waive the deposit completely because it is a city rule. However, he can accept a personal check as a hold. He promises not to cash the check unless there is damage. This means the money will not leave Elena's bank account unless something goes wrong. It is a gesture of trust. Elena feels a huge wave of relief. Relief is that feeling when worry goes away. She thanks him profusely. Profusely means a lot, or repeatedly. She writes the check and hands it to him. Mr. Finch types something into his computer and prints out a permit. He hands it to her and tells her strictly, "No glitter and no open flames." That means no candles on the tables, only on the cake for a few seconds. Elena agrees to everything. She walks out of the library feeling like she has won a victory. Now, the story jumps forward in time. It is 2 weeks later. It is the week before the party. This period is often called crunch time. Crunch time is a casual phrase used to describe the period of intense pressure just before a deadline. Elena is in her kitchen. Her kitchen table is covered in craft paper, scissors, glue, and photos. She is making a photo collage of Mrs. Gable's life. Her phone rings. It is Sarah, the bakery owner. Elena answers, expecting good news. But Sarah sounds terrible. Her voice is hoarse and scratchy. Sarah tells Elena that she has come down with a bad flu. Elena panics. She asks if Sarah can still make the bread for the party. Sarah coughs and says that she cannot be in the kitchen while she is sick because it is against health regulations. Elena feels the stress returning. The bread was a huge part of the meal. Without it, the potluck will feel incomplete. But then, Sarah continues, she says that her assistant, Mark, has the recipe, and he has agreed to come in early on Saturday to bake the focaccia bread. Sarah assures Elena that Mark is a great baker and the bread will be delicious. Elena lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She thanks Sarah and tells her to get some rest. This short phone conversation is a great example of a minor crisis. In almost every project, something goes wrong at the last minute. Being able to understand the problem, Sarah is sick, and the solution, Mark will bake, quickly is essential for fluency. You have to filter out the emotion, Sarah's sick voice, and focus on the facts. Will the bread be ready? Yes or no? Elena hangs up the phone and looks at her checklist. The venue is secure. The food is coordinated. The decorations are being made. Now she needs to confirm the ruse. A ruse is a trick or a plan intended to deceive someone, usually for a good reason, like a surprise party. The plan is that Mrs. Gable thinks she is going to the library to help judge a children's poetry contest. The principal, Mrs. Higgins, is the one who will bring her there. Elena sends a text message to Mrs. Higgins. "Are we still on for Saturday at 6 p.m.? Mrs. Higgins replies immediately with a thumbs-up emoji. Everything is set. Let's move to the day of the party. It is Saturday afternoon. The sky is clear, and the sun is beginning to set, casting a golden light over the town. Elena and Julian are at the library early. They are carrying boxes of decorations from Julian's car into the conservatory. Let me describe the conservatory for you so you can visualize it. It is a long room attached to the side of the brick library. The walls are made of glass panes framed in green metal. The floor is tiled with black and white stones. Inside, there are large potted plants, ferns, small palm trees, and ivy hanging from the ceiling. It smells like earth and green leaves. It is a beautiful, peaceful space. But right now, it is chaotic. Chaotic means full of confusion and disorder. Julian is trying to set up a long folding table for the food, but the floor is uneven. Every time he puts the table down, it wobbles. Wobble is a verb that means to move unsteadily from side to side. If you put a drink on a wobbly table, it will spill. Julian is on his hands and knees, trying to put folded pieces of cardboard under the table legs to balance it. Elena is running around taping streamers to the metal frames of the windows. She is checking the time constantly. It is 5 o'clock. The guests will start arriving at 5:30. Mrs. Gable will arrive at 6. They have 30 minutes to finish setting up. Suddenly, the door opens and a man walks in. It is not a guest. It is the janitor, the person who cleans the building. He is pushing a large mop bucket. He looks at Elena and Julian and stops. He says he was told to mop the floors in here at 5 o'clock. Elena freezes. If he mops the floor now, it will be wet and slippery when the guests arrive. Someone could slip and fall. That would be a disaster. Elena approaches the janitor. She explains that they have an event starting in 30 minutes. The janitor shakes his head. He says his schedule says, cleaning, 5 p.m. He is just doing his job. This is another conflict. It is a conflict of scheduling. Elena looks at Julian for help, but Julian is still under the table fighting with the wobbly leg. Elena has to solve this. She smiles at the janitor. She compliments him on how clean the library always looks. She asks him if he could possibly come back at 9 o'clock, after the party is over. She says they will even help him sweep up the trash, so his job will be easier. The janitor thinks about it. He looks at his bucket. He looks at the clock. Finally, he nods. He says he will come back at 8:30 to start the cleanup. He turns around and leaves. Elena leans against the wall. That was close. Sometimes, resolving a conflict in English isn't about arguing. It is about finding a compromise that works for everyone. She offered to help him later in exchange for him leaving now. It was a trade. By 5:30, the room looks magical. The wobbly table is stable, covered with a white tablecloth. The streamers are gold and silver, catching the last light of the sun. The food starts to arrive. This is the best part of a potluck. Tom arrives with a huge tray of lasagna that smells like garlic and tomato sauce. Another friend, Lisa, brings a bowl of colorful salad. Someone else brings a platter of roasted chicken. The table, which was empty 10 minutes ago, is now groaning under the weight of the food. Groaning usually refers to a sound a person makes in pain. But when we say a table is groaning with food, it is a poetic way of saying there is a huge amount of heavy, delicious food on it. Then, Mark arrives with the bread. It is warm. He has brought 3 large loaves of focaccia with rosemary and sea salt. The smell fills the conservatory, mixing with the smell of the plants. It feels cozy and welcoming. The guests start to fill the room. There is a buzz of conversation. People are hugging, shaking hands, and laughing. Elena stands in the corner and watches. She sees old students reconnecting with each other. She sees the math teacher laughing with the science teacher. She sees Mr. Henderson, the neighbor with the dog, chatting happily with Julian. It seems Julian was right. The feud is over. This atmosphere is what we call convivial. Convivial means friendly, lively, and enjoyable. It is the perfect mood for a party. But amidst the happiness, Elena feels a knot of anxiety in her stomach. The guest of honor is not here yet. It is 5:55. 5 minutes to go. Elena claps her hands to get everyone's attention. The room goes quiet. She tells everyone to hide. This is the classic surprise party moment. Hide is a strong word, but in this context, it just means to move out of sight. The guests crouch behind the large planters or move to the far corners of the room where the shadows are deeper. Julian switches off the main lights, leaving only the soft glow of the emergency exit signs and the street lamps from outside shining through the glass. The room is silent. You can hear people breathing. You can hear the distant sound of traffic. Elena is hiding near the door. She checks her phone. A text from Mrs. Higgins. Parking now. This moment of waiting is universal. It doesn't matter what language you speak. Everyone knows the feeling of holding their breath in the dark, waiting to shout, "Surprise!" It is a mixture of excitement and fear. What if she doesn't come in? What if she has a heart attack? What if she hates it? These thoughts race through Elena's mind. She hears footsteps on the pavement outside. They are slow footsteps. Then, the sound of the door handle turning. Click. The door opens. We are going to stop exactly there for a moment to reflect before the climax. We have built the world. We have solved the problems of the venue, the money, and the food. We have navigated the social interactions with the librarian and the janitor. We have set the stage. Now, before we move to the final resolution, I want you to think about the vocabulary of process we used today. We talked about logistics, protocol, negotiating, compromising, and executing a plan. These are not just party words. These are business words. You can use them in your job. If you are a project manager, you deal with deposits and schedules. If you work in customer service, you deal with waiving fees and handling complaints. Elena's story is a casual story, but the English skills underneath it are professional. I also want you to notice how much descriptive language we used for the setting. The smell of old paper, the wobbly table, the groaning table. These details help your brain create a picture. When you listen to English, don't just translate the words. Try to visualize the image. If you can see the wobbly table in your mind, you are much more likely to remember the word wobbly. I have a small task for you before you listen to the conclusion. I want you to imagine you are Elena. You are standing in the dark, waiting for the door to open. What are 3 adjectives you would use to describe your feelings? Are you anxious, excited, proud, terrified, Say them out loud. Connecting words to feelings is a powerful way to make them stick in your long-term memory. Welcome back to the third and final section of our special Listening Stamina series. If you have been with us from the beginning, you have already accomplished something huge. You have followed a complex story through planning, budgeting, negotiating, and problem-solving. You have trained your ears to hear details, numbers, and logistical challenges. Now, we have reached the finish line. In this final part, we are going to experience the party itself. The language here will shift. We are moving away from the business vocabulary of planning and into the emotional vocabulary of celebration, gratitude, and friendship. You will hear speeches, you will hear descriptions of feelings, and you will hear how characters resolve their relationships. This type of listening is vital because it requires you to understand not just the facts, but the mood and the atmosphere. Let's step back into the library conservatory. It is dark. The air is thick with anticipation. 50 people are hiding in the shadows, crouching behind large potted ferns and the long buffet table. Elena is standing near the door, her hand resting on the light switch. Her heart is pounding against her ribs. She takes a deep breath to steady herself. Suddenly, the handle of the glass door turns. It makes a sharp click that echoes in the silent room. The door pushes open. Mrs. Gable walks in first. She is a petite woman, which means she is small and thin. She has silver hair tied back in a neat bun and is wearing a sensible wool coat. Beside her is Mrs. Higgins, the principal, who looks like she is trying very hard not to smile. Mrs. Gable stops in the doorway. She looks confused. She squints into the darkness. She asks Mrs. Higgins, "Why are the lights off? Is the poetry contest over?" Mrs. Higgins steps aside and gives a small nod to Elena. That is the signal. Elena flips the switch. The overhead lights flood the room with brightness. At the exact same moment, 50 people jump up from their hiding spots and shout, "Surprise!" The sound is deafening. Deafening is an adjective we use when a noise is so loud it makes it hard to hear anything else. Mrs. Gable gasps. She brings both hands up to cover her mouth. She stumbles back a step, looking completely shocked. Her eyes go wide. For a few seconds, she doesn't say a single word. She just looks from face to face. She sees the math teacher. She sees her former students who are now doctors, mechanics, and parents. She sees her neighbor, Mr. Henderson. Then her eyes fill with tears. She starts to laugh and cry at the same time. This is a very specific emotional reaction called being overwhelmed. To be overwhelmed means you have so many strong feelings that you don't know how to process them all at once. She shakes her head as if she is dreaming. Elena steps forward. She is the first one to approach. She gives Mrs. Gable a warm, gentle hug. She whispers, "Happy retirement, Mrs. Gable. We couldn't let you leave without saying goodbye properly." Mrs. Gable squeezes Elena's hand tightly. She looks at Elena and says, "I thought everyone had forgotten I was leaving." That sentence is both heartbreaking and heartwarming. It shows why this party was so necessary. It validates Mrs. Gable's entire career. To validate means to confirm that something is valuable and true. By being there, all these people are validating her 40 years of hard work. The party begins in earnest. In earnest means it starts with full energy. Julian hits the play button on his phone, and soft jazz music fills the air, just as they planned. The room instantly transforms from a quiet hiding spot into a lively celebration. The sound of chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses fills the conservatory. Mrs. Gable is swarmed by people. Swarmed is a verb usually used for bees or insects, But when we use it for people, it means a crowd surrounds someone closely. Everyone wants to shake her hand. Everyone wants to tell her a story about how she helped them. She listens to every single one, nodding and smiling. Elena steps back and leans against a pillar. She watches the scene. This is the moment every event organizer dreams of. She sees that the machinery of the party is working perfectly. The food line is moving smoothly. The drinks are flowing. No one is slipping on the floor. She glances at the food table. The lasagna is already half gone. The rosemary focaccia bread is a huge hit. People are going back for seconds. She sees Tom, the lasagna maker, talking to Sarah's assistant, Mark. They are laughing and swapping recipes. The community is connecting. Julian walks up to Elena. He is holding 2 plastic cups of fruit punch. He hands one to her. He taps his cup against hers, a toast. He looks at her and says, "You did it, Elena. This is perfect." Elena takes a sip of the sweet punch. She smiles and shakes her head. She tells him, "We did it. I couldn't have done this without you." She admits that she was ready to give up in the cafe that rainy afternoon. She tells him that his idea about the library saved the day. Julian laughs and uses a common idiom. 2 heads are better than 1. This means that solving a problem is easier when 2 people work together. He points to the corner of the room. "Look," he says. Elena looks. She sees Mr. Henderson, the neighbor with the dog, holding a plate of chicken. He is walking toward Mrs. Gable. Elena tenses up. She remembers the feud about the fence. She worries he might say something rude. But instead, Mr. Henderson smiles. He offers Mrs. Gable a napkin. They start talking. After a moment, Mrs. Gable laughs and touches his arm. The feud is officially over. Julian was right. People can make up. Now, it is time for the formal part of the evening. The speeches. Elena walks to the center of the room. She picks up a spoon and taps it against a glass. Ding, ding, ding. The sharp sound cuts through the noise. The room slowly quiets down. The music is turned off. Elena clears her throat. She welcomes everyone and thanks them for coming. She keeps her introduction short because she knows that in public speaking, less is more. She introduces the first speaker, Mrs. Higgins, the principal. Elena and Julian exchange a nervous glance. Remember, they were terrified Mrs. Higgins would talk for an hour and bore everyone. They implemented the 3-minute rule. Elena gently reminds everyone, "We have many people who want to share memories, so please keep your remarks brief." Mrs. Higgins steps up. She takes a piece of paper out of her pocket. She looks at her watch. She smiles at Elena, acknowledging the rule. She starts to speak. Her tone is formal but affectionate. She talks about Mrs. Gable's unwavering dedication. Unwavering means steady, constant, and not changing. She tells a quick story about how Mrs. Gable came to school during a blizzard to make sure a student had their textbook for an exam. It is a touching story. And, miraculously, she finishes in exactly 3 minutes. Elena breathes a huge sigh of relief. Then, something unexpected happens. Mr. Henderson raises his hand. He asks if he can say a few words. The room goes very quiet. Everyone knows about the arguments. Everyone is curious. Mr. Henderson stands up. He clears his throat. He looks at Mrs. Gable and admits, "We have had our differences over the fence and the dogs." The audience chuckles nervously. But then his voice softens. He says, "But despite our arguments, I have always admired you. I see the lights on in your study late at night, grading papers. I know how much you care about these kids." He raises his plastic cup. "To a worthy opponent and a great teacher, I will miss you." Mrs. Gable wipes a tear from her eye and raises her glass in return. It is a moment of total reconciliation. Reconciliation is the restoration of friendly relations. It is a beautiful moment that shows even difficult relationships can end on a positive note. Finally, it is Mrs. Gable's turn to speak. She stands in the middle of the circle. She does not have any notes. She looks at the faces around her. She starts by saying she is not good at speeches. She prefers listening to talking. She talks about her career not as a job, but as a journey. She says that teaching history was never about the dates or the wars. It was about the people. She points to Tom and says she remembers when he failed his first test and how hard he studied to pass the next one. She points to Elena and says she remembers how shy Elena was in the 9th grade and how proud she is to see her leading this room today. This is the emotional climax of the story. Mrs. Gable says, "Leaving this town is the hardest thing I have ever done. But seeing you all here tonight makes me feel that I am not really leaving. I am leaving a part of myself behind in all of you." This is a metaphor. She is not physically leaving a part of herself, but her influence, her lessons, and her love remain with them. She finishes by thanking Elena and Julian specifically. She calls them the architects of this memory. An architect is someone who designs buildings, but here she means they designed this moment in time. The room erupts in applause. People are cheering. Some are crying. It is a perfect send-off. After the speeches, the party begins to wind down. Wind down means to slowly come to an end. People start to put on their coats. They hug Mrs. Gable one last time. They grab small containers of leftover food to take home, a classic tradition of potlucks. By 8:30, the room is almost empty. The janitor arrives, pushing his mop bucket exactly on time. Elena and Julian grab broomsticks and trash bags. True to their word, they help him clean. They stack the folding chairs. They fold the tablecloths. They sweep up the crumbs. They work fast. Within 30 minutes, the conservatory looks exactly as it did before. Empty, dark, and quiet. It is like the party never happened, except for the lingering smell of rosemary and the warmth in the air. Mrs. Gable is the last to leave. Mrs. Higgins is waiting in the car to drive her home. Before she leaves, Mrs. Gable turns to Elena. She reaches into her bag and pulls out a small old book. It is a copy of a history book she used to read to the class years ago. She hands it to Elena. "I want you to have this," Mrs. Gable says softly. "You were always the one who asked the best questions." Elena takes the book. It is heavy and smells like vanilla and old paper. She is deeply touched. Touched here means emotionally moved. She thanks Mrs. Gable. They hug one last time, and Mrs. Gable walks out into the cool night air. Elena watches the red taillights of the car fade into the darkness. Julian walks up beside her. He puts his hands in his pockets. He looks at Elena and asks, "So, how do you feel?" Elena thinks for a moment. She is exhausted. Her feet hurt from standing in heels. Her voice is tired from talking. But she feels light. She feels happy. She tells Julian, "I feel complete." It is a sense of closure. She finished what she started. She honored someone she loved. And she proved to herself that she could handle a big challenge. Julian nods. He says, "Same here." Then, his stomach makes a loud growling noise. He laughs. He says, "You know, we were so busy running the party, we didn't actually eat any of the food." Elena realizes he is right. She is starving. They both laugh. Julian suggests they go to the all-night diner down the street for a burger and fries. Elena agrees immediately. That sounds like the perfect ending to the night. They walk out of the library, side by side, talking about the funny moments of the night. Mrs. Higgins's 3-minute miracle, the janitor's punctuality, and the delicious smell of the lasagna. The story ends not with a big explosion, but with a quiet, happy moment of friendship. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our story. Let's take a moment to reflect on what we just experienced. Over this series, we simulated a real-life project. We started with a stressful problem, worked through the logistics, dealt with unexpected changes, and finally enjoyed the emotional reward of the event. This narrative arc, beginning, middle, and end, is exactly how most stories and conversations in English are structured. In this final section, did you notice the shift in vocabulary? We used words like overwhelmed, reconciliation, validate, and architects. These are powerful words. They describe the human experience. As you move from B1 to B2 and C1 levels, your ability to describe how you feel and why it matters becomes just as important as describing what happened. We also practiced listening to monologues during the speeches. Listening to one person speak for a long time requires a different kind of focus than listening to a dialogue. You have to follow their train of thought without interruptions. This is great practice for listening to lectures, presentations, or long stories in real life. I want to leave you with a final thought on listening stamina. You have just listened to over 10,000 words of English. Maybe you understood every single word. Maybe you missed a few. That is completely okay. The goal of this exercise was immersion. By listening to a long, continuous story, you forced your brain to stop translating and start thinking in English. You started predicting what would happen next. You started feeling the emotions of the characters. That is what fluency feels like. Fluency is not about perfection. It is about flow. It is about being able to stay in the conversation, even when it gets fast, even when it gets emotional, and even when it gets complicated. Today, you proved that you have the stamina to do that. I encourage you to keep this up. Try to listen to a 20-minute podcast tomorrow. Watch a show without subtitles. Read a chapter of a book without stopping. Push your limits. Your brain is a muscle, and you just gave it a fantastic workout. Thank you so much for joining me, Alex, on this journey. It has been a pleasure to be your guide through Elena and Julian's story. I hope you feel more confident and more prepared for your own English conversations. If you enjoyed this series, please let me know. Tell me what your favorite part was. Was it the planning in the cafe, the negotiation with Mr. Finch, or the surprise party itself? I would love to hear from you. Until next time, keep listening, keep practicing, and remember, every conversation is a chance to learn. I am Alex, and this is English in Fluency. Goodbye for now.